reflect upon the intention of what is veiled behind the letter of the rituals, we can scarcely claim to understand our own doctrine, we can scarcely claim to have been regularly initiated, passed and raised in the higher sense of those expressions, whatever ceremonies we have formerly passed through. The letter killeth, the spirit giveth life. Let us inquire what the spirit of this puzzle language is. The method of all great religious and initiatory systems has been to teach their doctrine in the form of myth, legend or allegory. As our first tracing board lecture says, the philosophers, unwilling to expose their mysteries to vulgar eyes, meaning concealed their tenets and principles of philosophy under hieroglyphical figures, and our traditional history is one of these hieroglyphical figures. Now the literally minded never see behind the letter of the allegory. The truly initiated mind discerns the allegory's spiritual value. In fact, part of the purpose of all initiation was, and still is, to educate the mind in penetrating the outward shell of all phenomena, and the value of initiation depends upon the way in which the inward truths are allowed to influence our thought and lives and to awaken in us still deeper powers of consciousness. The legend of the third degree, then, in which the essence of Masonic doctrine lies, was brought into our system by some advanced minds who derive their knowledge from other and concealed sources. The legend is an adaptation of a very old one and existed in various forms long before its association with modern Masonry. In the guise of a story about the building of a temple by King Solomon at Jerusalem, they were promulgating the truth which I have alluded to before and which is generally known as the fall of man. As our legend runs, upon the literal side of it, it was the purpose of a great king to erect a superb structure. He was assisted in that work by another king who supplied the building materials, by a skillful artificer whose business was to put these together according to a preordained plan, and by large companies of craftsmen and laborers. But in the course of the work an evil conspiracy arose, resulting in the destruction of the chief artificer and preventing the completion of the building, which remains unfinished, therefore, to this day. Now I will ask you to observe that this legend cannot refer to any historical building built in the old metropolis of Palestine. If we refer to the Bible as an authority, you will find that temple was completed, it was afterwards destroyed, rebuilt and destroyed again on more than one occasion. Moreover, the biblical accounts make no reference whatever to the conspiracy, or to the death of Hiram. On the other hand, they state expressly that Hiram made an end of building the temple, that it was finished and completed in every particular. It is very clear then that we must keep the two subjects entirely separate in our minds, and recognize that the Masonic story deals with something quite distinct from the biblical story. What temple then is referred to? The temple, brethren, that is still incomplete and unfinished is none that can be built with hands. It is that temple of which all material edifices are but the types and symbols. It is the temple of the collective body of humanity itself, of which the great initiate St. Paul said, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God?" A perfect humanity was the great temple which, in the councils of the Most High, was intended to be reared in the mystical holy city, of which the local Jerusalem was the type. The three great master builders, Solomon and the two Hirims, are a triad corresponding after a manner with the Holy Trinity of the Christian religion, Hiram Abiff being the chief architect, he by whom all things were made and in whom, as St. Paul said, using Masonic language, the whole building fitly framed together groweth unto a holy temple in the Lord. The material of this mystical temple was the souls of men, at once the living stones, the fellow craftsmen and collaborators with the divine purpose. But in the course of the construction of this ideal temple, something happened that wrecked the scheme and delayed the fulfillment indefinitely. This was the fall of man, the conspiracy of the craftsmen. Turn to the book of Genesis, you will find the same subject related in the allegory of Adam and Eve. They were intended, as you know, for perfection and happiness, but their creator's project became nullified by their disobedience to certain conditions imposed upon them. I will ask you to observe that their offense was precisely that committed by our Masonic conspirators. They had been forbidden to eat of the tree of knowledge, or, in Masonic language, they were under obligation not to attempt to extort the secrets of a superior degree which they had not attained. Now the Hebrew word Hiram means guru, teacher of supreme knowledge, divine light and wisdom, and the liberty that comes therewith. But this knowledge is only for the perfected man. It is that knowledge that Hiram said was no one to but three in the world, that is, known only in the councils of the divine Trinity, but it is knowledge that with patience and perseverance every Mason, every child of the Creator, may in due time become entitled to a participation in. But just as Adam and Eve's attempt to obtain illicit knowledge caused their expulsion from Eden and defeated the divine purpose until they and their posterity should regain the paradise they had lost, so also the completion of the great mystical temple was prevented for the time being by the conspirators' attempt to extort from Hiram the master's secrets, and its construction is delayed until time and circumstances, God's time, and the circumstances we create for ourselves restore to us the lost and genuine secrets of our nature and of the divine purpose in us. The tragedy of Hiram-Abif, then, is not the record of any vulgar, brutal murder of an individual man. It is a parable of cosmic and universal loss, an allegory of the breakdown of a divine scheme. We are dealing with no calamity that occurred during the erection of a building in an eastern city, but with a moral disaster to universal humanity. Hiram is slain. In other words, the faculty of enlightened wisdom has been cut off from us. Owing to that disaster, mankind is here today in this world of imperfect knowledge, of limited faculties, of checkered happiness, of perpetual toil, of death and frequent bitterness and pain. Our life here is, to use a poet's words, an ever-moaning battle in the mist, death in all life and lying in all love, the meanest having power upon the highest, and the high purpose broken by the worm. The temple of human nature is unfinished and we know not how to complete it. The want of plans and designs to regulate the disorders of individual and social life indicates to us all that some heavy calamity has befallen us as a race. The absence of a clear and guiding principle in the world's life reminds us of the utter confusion into which the absence of that supreme wisdom, which is personified as Hiram, has thrown us all, and causes every reflective mind to attribute to some fatal catastrophe his mysterious disappearance. We all long for that light and wisdom which have become lost to us. Like the craftsman in search of the body, we go our different ways in search of what is lost. Many of us make no discovery of importance throughout the length of our days. We seek it in pleasure, in work, in all the varied occupations and diversions of our lives. We seek it in intellectual pursuits, in religion, in masonry, and those who search farthest and deepest are those who become most conscious of the loss and who are compelled to cry Macabone. Macbana. The master is smitten, or, as the Christian scriptures word it, they have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him. Hiram-Abif is slain. The high light and wisdom ordained to guide and enlighten humanity are wanting to us. The full blaze of light and perfect knowledge that were to be ours are vanished from the race, but in the divine providence there still remains to us a glimmering light in the east. In a dark world, from which as it were the sun has disappeared, we have still our five senses and our rational faculties to work with, and these provide us with the substituted secrets that must distinguish us before we regain the genuine ones. Where is Hiram buried? We are taught that the wisdom of the Most High personified as King Solomon ordered him to be interred in a fitting masonry sepulchre outside the holy city, in a grave from the center 3 feet between N and S, 3 feet between E and W, and 5 feet or more perpendicular. Where, brethren, do you imagine that grave to be? Can you locate it by following these minute details of its situation? Probably you have never thought of the matter as other than an ordinary burial outside the walls of a geographical Jerusalem. But the grave of Hiram is ourselves. Each of us is the sepulchre in which the smitten master is interred. If we know it not, it is a further sign of our benightedness. At the center of ourselves, deeper than any dissecting knife can reach or than any physical investigation can fathom, lies buried a vital and immortal principle, the glimmering ray that affiliates us to the divine center of all life, and that is never wholly extinguished however evil or imperfect our lives may be. We are the grave of the Master. The lost guiding light is buried at the center of ourselves. high as your hand may reach upwards or downwards from the center of your own body, that is, 3 feet between N and S. Far as it can reach to right or left of the middle of your person, that is, 3 feet between W and E. And 5 feet or more perpendicular the height of the human body. These are the indications by which our cryptic ritual describes the tomb of Hiram Abiff at the center of ourselves. He is buried outside the holy city, in the same sense that the posterity of Adam have all been placed outside the walls of paradise, for nothing unclean can enter into the holy place, which elsewhere in our scriptures is called the kingdom of heaven. What then is this center, by reviving and using which we may hope to regain the secrets of our lost nature? We may reason from analogies, as the divine life and will is the center of the whole universe and controls it, as the sun is the center and life-giver of our solar system and controls and feeds with life the planets circling round it, so at the secret center of individual human life exists a vital, immortal principle, the spirit and the spiritual will of man. This is the faculty, by using which, when we have found it, we can never err. It is a point within the circle of our own nature and, living as we do in this physical world, the circle of our existence is bounded by 2 grand parallel lines, one representing Moses, the other King Solomon, that is to say, law and wisdom, the divine ordinances regulating the universe on the one hand, the divine wisdom and mercy that follow us all the days of our life on the other. Very truly then the Mason who keeps himself thus circumscribed cannot err. Masonry, then, is a system of religious philosophy in that it provides us with a doctrine of the universe and of our place in it. It indicates whence we are come and whither we may return. It has 2 purposes. Its first purpose is to show that man has fallen away from a high and holy center to the circumference or externalized condition in which we now live, to indicate that those who so desire may regain that center by finding the center in ourselves, for, since deity is as a circle whose center is everywhere, it follows that a divine center, a vital and immortal principle, exists within ourselves by developing which we may hope to regain our lost and primal stature. The second purpose of the craft doctrine is to declare the way by which that center may be found within ourselves, and this teaching is embodied in the discipline and ordeals delineated in the 3 degrees. The Masonic doctrine of the center, or, in other words, the Christian axiom that the kingdom of heaven is within you, is nowhere better stated than by the poet Browning. Truth is within ourselves. It takes no rise from outward things, whate'er you may believe. There is an inmost center in ourselves where truth abides in fullness, and to know rather consists in finding out a way whence the imprisoned splendor may escape than by effecting entrance for a light supposed to be without. Brethren, may we all come to the knowledge how to open the lodge upon the center of ourselves, and so realize in our own conscious experience the finding of the imprisoned splendor hidden in the depths of our being, whose rising within ourselves will bring us peace and salvation. How then does the craft doctrine prescribe for the liberation of this imprisoned center? Its first injunctions are those of our first degree. There must be purity of thought and purpose. I need scarcely remind you that the word candidate derives from the Latin candidus, white, in the sense of purity, or that our postulants before entering the lodge leave behind them in the precincts the garments that belong to the fashion of the outer world whose ideals they are desirous of relinquishing, and enter the lodge clad of in white as emblematic of the blamelessness of their thought and the purification of their lives. As this symbolic white clothing is worn during each of the 3 degrees, it is as though the seeker after the high light of the center must always come uttering the triple ascription, Holy, 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 as the token of the threefold purity of body, soul and spirit, which is essential to the achievement of his quest. He has left all money and metals behind him, for the gross things of this world are superfluous in the world that lies within, whilst if any dross of thought or imperfections of character remain in him, he will find the impossibility of attaining to the consciousness of his highest self. He will learn that he must renounce them and begin again, and that his attempt at real initiation must be repeated. He must be animated by a spirit of universal sympathy. Financial dole and practical relief to the pecuniarily poor and distressed are admirable practices as far as they go, but they by no means exhaust the meaning of the term charity as Masonry intends it. The payment of a few guineas to philanthropic institutions